The massive space station Omega-7 stretched across the void like a metal city. Its spinning rings created artificial gravity for the thousands of beings living inside. Today, the station buzzed with unusual activity. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered to watch something that happened only once every few decades. A new species was joining the Galactic Council. Captain Lee Dongwu stood at the observation deck, watching the alien ships dock at the station. His dark uniform bore the simple patch of Earth, still new and unfamiliar among the complex symbols of older galactic civilizations. Behind him, his small team of humans prepared for what would determine their species' role in galactic society. Dr. Park So-young adjusted her scanner as she studied the readings from passing aliens. Each species that walked by the observation windows represented millions of years of evolution on different worlds. The tall, crystal-like Veltharians moved with an almost ghostly grace. Their transparent bodies caught the station's light and scattered it in beautiful patterns. When they walked, their feet barely seemed to touch the ground. "Look at them," whispered Engineer Kim Tae-ho, watching a group of Veltharians glide past. "They move like they're dancing with the air itself." So-young nodded but kept her attention on her scanner readings. The Veltharian bone structure was hollow like a bird's bones, but even lighter. Their muscles were thin fibers designed for precise, delicate movement. Evolution had shaped them for grace and speed on a low-gravity world with thick atmosphere. A different kind of movement caught their attention. The insectoid Zephyrians scuttled past in the corridor below. Their 6 legs moved in perfect coordination, carrying them faster than any human could run. Their compound eyes tracked multiple directions at once, processing dozens of visual inputs simultaneously. "Their reaction time is incredible," So-young murmured, watching her scanner. "They can process and respond to stimuli in microseconds. Our nervous system takes nearly 10 times longer to send signals from brain to muscle." Captain Dongwu said nothing, but his jaw tightened slightly. He had spent 20 years in Earth's special forces, facing impossible situations with limited resources. He knew that numbers on a scanner didn't tell the whole story about survival and combat. But here, in this sterile environment of galactic politics, numbers seemed to be everything. The human delegation made their way through the station's corridors toward the assessment center. Other species stepped aside as they passed, but not out of respect. The aliens looked at them with something that might have been pity. Conversation stopped when humans approached, then resumed in whispers once they passed. "Did you hear what Commander Nethvar said in the briefing yesterday?" The voice belonged to a Gorvanian officer, his thick armored hide making him look like a walking tank. He called them another heavy worlder species, good for lifting and digging, but not much else. His companion, a graceful Veltharian with skin like living glass, made a sound that might have been laughter. "The preliminary scans are quite clear. Dense bone structure, heavy muscle mass, slow neural processing. They're built like the Borthak, all strength, no finesse." Dr. So-young felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but Captain Dongwu placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Let them talk," he said quietly. "We'll show them what humans can do when it matters." The assessment center occupied an entire section of the station. Massive holographic projectors could create any environment imaginable. Gravity generators could simulate the conditions of 1,000 different worlds. Sensor arrays more sophisticated than anything on Earth tracked every movement, every heartbeat, every neural impulse of the beings inside. Commander Nethvar, the Veltharian in charge of the assessments, greeted each species with appropriate ceremony. When he reached the humans, his transparent features arranged themselves into what might have been a polite smile. "Welcome to Station Omega-7, he said, his voice carrying the musical quality typical of his species. "I trust you understand the importance of these assessments. The Galactic Council must determine how each new species can best contribute to our civilization." Captain Dongwu nodded respectfully. "We're ready to demonstrate human capabilities, Commander." "I'm sure you are," Nethvar replied, though his tone suggested he had already decided what those capabilities might be. "Your species' physical characteristics are quite impressive, very solid, very sturdy. I imagine you'll find roles in construction, mining, perhaps heavy manufacturing." Behind Nethvar, other alien officers exchanged knowing looks. To them, humans looked exactly like what they expected from a heavy-gravity world species. Thick bones to handle high pressure, dense muscles for strength, slow, methodical movement patterns designed for endurance rather than speed. General Kriegstall, a massive Gorvanian whose natural armor made him look like a walking fortress, studied the humans with professional interest. "They have the build for shock troops," he rumbled in a voice like grinding stone. "Good for frontal assault where you need something that can absorb punishment and keep moving forward." "Perhaps," Commander Nethvar agreed. "Though they lack the speed for modern combat doctrine, warfare today requires lightning reflexes and precise maneuvering. These creatures appear designed for a more primitive approach to conflict." Dr. So Young bit back her response. She wanted to tell them about human history, about how her species had survived ice ages and plagues, asteroid impacts and supervolcanic eruptions, about how they had fought wars across every environment on Earth, from Arctic tundra to tropical jungles, from mountain peaks to ocean depths, but she knew they wouldn't understand. Not yet. The assessment schedule appeared on the holographic displays throughout the center. Each species would demonstrate their signature abilities in controlled environments. The Veltharians would show their aerial capabilities and precision movement. The Zephyrians would display their reaction times and multi-target tracking abilities. The Gorvanians would prove their strength and defensive capabilities. Humans were scheduled for basic strength and endurance tests. Nothing too demanding. Commander Nethvar explained with what he probably thought was kindness. "We don't want to push your people beyond their natural limitations." As the alien officers moved away to prepare the testing chambers, the human team gathered in a quiet corner of the assessment center. Captain Dongwu looked at each of his people. Pilot Kim Tae-ho, whose reflexes had kept him alive through a dozen impossible aerospace missions. Sergeant Choi Minji, who could navigate urban combat environments that would confuse even advanced AI systems. Dr. Park So-young, whose understanding of biology and tactics had saved countless lives in the field. "They think they know what we are," Dongwu said quietly. "They've looked at our scans and decided we're simple, slow, and predictable. The preliminary data does seem to support their conclusions," So-young admitted reluctantly. "Our bone density is higher than most species. Our neural processing appears slower than Zephyrian standards. Our movement patterns lack Veltharian elegance. But they're only seeing part of the picture," Tae-ho pointed out. "Those scans were taken under controlled conditions with us at rest. They have no idea what happens when the situation gets complicated." Sergeant Minji smiled grimly. "On Earth we have a saying, the enemy gets a vote. All these perfect, specialized species have probably never faced an opponent who refuses to follow the rules they're designed for." Dr. So-young pulled up her scanner readings from their walk through the station. The data showed something interesting that she had been thinking about since they arrived. Every alien species they had encountered showed clear evolutionary specialization. The Veltharians were optimized for grace and precision, the Zephyrians for speed and reactions, the Gorvanians for strength and defense. But humans showed something different in their biological patterns. Instead of being optimized for any single attribute, they seemed to maintain capabilities across a wide range of possibilities. They weren't the fastest or strongest or most precise. They were something else entirely. "Captain," she said slowly, "I think they're making a mistake in how they're categorizing us. These tests are designed to measure peak performance in controlled conditions. But our evolutionary history suggests we're designed for something else entirely." "What do you mean?" So-young looked around the sterile, perfectly controlled environment of the assessment center. "We didn't evolve to be perfect at any one thing. We evolved to survive when being perfect at one thing wasn't enough." Through the observation windows, they could see the testing chambers being prepared. Holographic environments that would challenge each species in their area of expertise. Perfect conditions for each alien race to demonstrate their specialized evolutionary advantages. But Captain Dongwu found himself wondering what would happen if those perfect conditions suddenly became imperfect. What would happen when the rules changed in the middle of the game? What would happen when survival required not just excellence but adaptability? He had a feeling they might find out sooner than anyone expected. The assessment was scheduled to begin in 6 hours. Around them, alien species prepared to showcase millions of years of evolutionary specialization, but the humans prepared for something different. They prepared to show what happened when evolution chose adaptability over specialization. They prepared to surprise everyone, including themselves. The assessment chamber stretched out like a vast metal cathedral. Holographic projectors lined the walls, ceiling, and floor, capable of creating any environment the testing protocols required. Advanced sensors tracked everything from heartbeat to neural activity, recording data that would determine each species' role in galactic society. Commander Nethvar stood at the central control platform, his crystalline form reflecting the light from dozens of monitoring screens. Around him, representatives from various galactic species observed from elevated viewing platforms. The air hummed with quiet conversations in a dozen different languages. "We begin with aerial agility assessment," Nethavar announced, his musical voice carrying throughout the chamber. "Sub-Commander Lithianus will demonstrate Veltharian capabilities." The holographic environment shifted, creating a complex three-dimensional maze of energy barriers, moving obstacles and narrow passages. The structure twisted through the air like a massive puzzle made of light and force fields. To most observers, it looked impossible to navigate. Lithianus stepped into the assessment area. Her transparent body seemed to become even more ethereal as she prepared. Then she moved. Dr. Park So-young watched in amazement as the Veltharian flowed through the obstacle course like liquid light. Lithianus didn't fly so much as dance through the air, her gossamer wings barely visible as they adjusted her position with microscopic precision. She slipped between energy barriers with centimeters to spare, twisted through spinning obstacles without losing speed, and navigated the entire course in movements so graceful they seemed choreographed. The monitoring displays lit up with impressive numbers: speed, precision, energy efficiency, spatial awareness, all scoring in the highest possible ranges. The other alien observers made appreciative sounds. Even by Veltharian standards, it was an exceptional performance. "Remarkable," General Krixtal rumbled from his viewing platform. "Their evolution on low-gravity worlds with dense atmospheric conditions has created the perfect aerial specialists." Pilot Kim Tae-ho watched the display with professional interest. He had logged thousands of hours in atmospheric and spaceflight, navigating everything from storm systems to asteroid fields. But he had to admit the Veltharian's natural ability was impressive. Her movements were so smooth they seemed effortless. "Next, we assess reaction time and multi-target engagement," Commander Nethvar announced. "Warcast Zekron will demonstrate Zephyrian capabilities." The holographic environment changed again. Now the chamber filled with dozens of moving targets, each following unpredictable patterns. Some moved fast, others slow. Some appeared and disappeared randomly. The test required tracking and engaging multiple threats simultaneously, while avoiding friendly targets mixed in with the hostiles. Zekron entered the assessment area with the quick, precise movements typical of his species. His 6 legs carried him in a complex dance across the chamber floor, while his compound eyes tracked targets in all directions. When the test began, he moved like a living weapon. The Zephyrian's performance was stunning. His reaction time measured in microseconds. He could identify, track, and engage 17 different targets simultaneously. His movements were so fast they appeared as blur to human eyes. The monitoring systems struggled to keep up with the speed of his responses. Sergeant Choi Minji studied the readouts with growing concern. She had trained in close-quarters combat for 15 years, facing multiple opponents in urban environments and confined spaces. But Zekron's performance was beyond anything she had ever seen. His natural reaction time was nearly 10 times faster than the best human athletes. "Incredible efficiency," observed a Gorvanian technical specialist. "Their nervous system processes multiple input streams simultaneously. In close combat, they would be nearly unbeatable." The alien observers continued to make impressed comments about each demonstration. When the Gorvanians showed their defensive capabilities, withstanding energy blasts that would destroy most materials, the viewing platforms filled with appreciative murmurs. When other species demonstrated their specialized abilities, the monitoring displays recorded performance levels that seemed almost impossible. Then it was humanity's turn. "The human assessment will focus on basic physical capabilities," Commander Nethvar announced. There was something in his tone that sounded almost apologetic. "We have designed appropriate tests for their particular evolutionary characteristics." The holographic environment shifted to create a simple obstacle course. Unlike the complex three-dimensional maze the Veltharians had navigated, this was a straightforward ground-based challenge. There were walls to climb, barriers to cross, and weights to move. It looked like something designed for basic physical training rather than advanced military assessment. Captain Lee Dong-woo felt his jaw tighten. but he kept his expression neutral. Around the viewing platforms, he could hear the quiet conversations of alien observers. "Poor creatures," one Veltharian was saying to another. "Look how simple their test is compared to ours. They must have very limited capabilities." "Dense bone structure," added a Zephyrian technical officer reading from his scanner. "Heavy muscle mass. Slow neural processing speeds. Classic heavy world evolutionary pattern. They're built for strength and endurance, nothing more." Pilot Kim Tae-ho stepped into the assessment area first. The obstacle course looked almost insulting in its simplicity compared to what the other species had faced. But he approached it with the same professional focus he brought to every mission. He began moving through the course at what seemed like a moderate pace. Compared to the flowing grace of the Veltharians or the lightning speed of the Zephyrians, his movement looked clumsy and straightforward. He climbed walls with obvious effort, crossed barriers with visible strain, and moved weights through pure physical strength. The monitoring displays showed exactly what the alien observers expected. Adequate performance in strength categories, but nothing exceptional. Reaction times that were respectable but far below Zephyrian standards. Movement patterns that were efficient but lacked Veltharian elegance. "As predicted," Commander Nethvar said quietly to General Krikstal. "Strong and steady but limited. They'll be useful for heavy construction work or basic security duties." Sergeant Minji went next, followed by the other human team members. Each performance confirmed what the aliens already believed about human capabilities. The monitoring systems recorded solid but unexceptional results across all categories. But Dr. Park So-young noticed something odd in the deeper biological readings. While the humans' external performance matched expectations, their internal systems were showing unusual patterns. Neural activity was higher than the performance suggested it should be. Muscle coordination showed complex interactions that seemed unnecessary for the simple tasks they were performing. It was as if the humans were holding something back, or as if the test environment wasn't challenging enough to reveal their true capabilities. She kept this observation to herself, but made careful notes in her personal scanner. The preliminary assessments were measuring human performance under ideal, controlled conditions. But human evolution had occurred under very different circumstances. Earth was not a controlled environment. It was a world where ice ages could arrive without warning, where supervolcanic eruptions could change the global climate in a matter of years, where asteroid impacts could reshape entire continents. Humans had evolved not for perfect conditions, but for the kind of chaos that would break most other species. Disappointing, but not unexpected, she heard one of the alien observers saying. "Another heavy world species with limited potential. They'll need to be assigned to basic labor roles." Dr. So-young looked at her teammates as they completed their assessments. Each of them had survived situations that would have been considered impossible by the standards being used here. Tae-ho had piloted damaged spacecraft through debris fields that should have been instantly fatal. Minji had fought her way out of urban combat zones where the rules of engagement changed every few minutes, but none of that experience was being tested here. The assessment environment was too clean, too predictable, too controlled to reveal what humans were actually capable of. "The preliminary assessments are complete," Commander Nethvar announced to the gathered observers. "The results confirm our initial biological assessments of each species. Assignment recommendations will be distributed within the standard processing period." As the alien representatives began filing out of the observation platforms, Dr. So-young caught fragments of their conversations. The humans seemed suitable for construction work on the outer colony worlds, perhaps mining operations in the asteroid belt. Their dense bone structure would handle the low gravity well, basic security duties at most, nothing requiring complex tactical thinking. Captain Dongwu nodded slowly. He had spent his career in situations where ideal conditions were a luxury no one could afford, where survival required not just skill, but the ability to adapt when skill wasn't enough. "Maybe we'll get a chance to show them what we're really capable of," he said, "when the conditions aren't so perfect." Around them, the assessment station prepared for the next phase of evaluation. But the preliminary results had already been recorded. In the galactic database, humanity was now classified as a basic labor species. Strong, reliable, but limited in capability. The aliens had no idea how wrong they were, and they would have no idea until the universe gave them a situation that couldn't be solved with specialization and perfect performance. A situation that required something the galaxy had never seen before. A situation that required humans, The emergency alarm cut through the quiet hum of Station Omega-7 like a blade. Red lights flashed in the corridors and urgent voices filled the communication channels. The peaceful assessment period was over. Commander Nethvar's crystalline form appeared on screens throughout the station. His usually calm demeanor showed cracks of worry. All assessment teams report to emergency briefing chamber immediately. We have a developing crisis. Captain Lee Dongwu led his human team through the corridors alongside the other species representatives. The Veltharians moved with their characteristic grace, but there was tension in their flowing movements. The Zephyrians scuttled quickly, their compound eyes tracking multiple directions as they processed the emergency signals. The briefing chamber filled rapidly with beings from across the galaxy. Holographic displays showed a star system that most recognized as Kepler 442, 3 jumps away from their current position. The display showed something that made everyone's attention focus immediately. Civilian transport under attack, Commander Nethvar announced. The vessel Harmony's Dawn carries 15,000 passengers from 12 different species. They are currently under assault by unknown hostile forces. The tactical display showed the situation in real time. A massive civilian transport hung in space near a gas giant, its hull damaged and venting atmosphere. Around it, smaller vessels darted in and out like predators attacking a wounded animal. The attackers used hit-and-run tactics, appearing from behind the gas giant's moons, striking, then disappearing again. The pirates are using micro-jump drives, explained Strike Leader Velthara, the Veltharian combat commander. They appear at random locations around the transport, attack specific systems, then vanish before we can respond. Very sophisticated tactics. General Krixtal studied the display with his armored head tilted. Traditional pursuit is impossible. They know the terrain better than we do, and their ships are faster than our standard vessels. Dr. Park So-young watched the attack patterns on the display. The pirate vessels moved in ways that seemed random, but she could see an underlying logic. They were targeting specific systems on the transport in a calculated sequence: life support, communications, engines, weapons. They weren't trying to destroy the ship quickly. They were trying to disable it completely. The Galactic Council has authorized an immediate response, Commander Nethvar continued. However, given the current circumstances, we have decided to make this a practical assessment exercise. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. All species currently undergoing assessment will participate in the rescue operation. This will provide an opportunity to evaluate combat capabilities under actual field conditions, rather than controlled simulations. Commander Han Ji-woo, the human rapid response team leader, stepped forward. What's the tactical situation on the transport itself? Unknown, replied Battle Prime Skektoth, the Zephyrian assault specialist. The pirates have jammed most communications. We know they've boarded the ship, but we don't know how many or what their objectives are beyond disabling the vessel. Engineer Yu Hye-jin studied the transport schematics as they appeared on the display. The ship was massive, with dozens of levels and thousands of compartments. If pirates had boarded it, finding and neutralizing them would be like searching a small city while under attack. The plan is straightforward, Strike Leader Velthara announced. Each species will deploy according to their demonstrated capabilities. Veltharian forces will handle the space-based pursuit of the pirate vessels. Our aerial superiority and precision navigation make us ideal for ship-to-ship combat. Battle Prime Skektoth nodded in agreement. Zephyrian forces will lead the boarding operations. Our reaction time and multi-target engagement capabilities are perfect for close-quarters combat inside the transport. General Krixtal's armored form shifted slightly. Gorvanian forces will establish defensive perimeters and handle heavy assault situations. Our natural armor and strength make us ideal for frontal engagements. Commander Nethvar turned to the human delegation. His expression was polite, but clearly showed he considered them an afterthought. Human forces will provide support operations, perhaps monitoring communications or securing non-critical areas of the transport. Captain Dongwu felt his team's frustration, but he kept his voice level. We're prepared to assist however needed. Of course, Velthara said with the kind of tone used when speaking to children. It's important that all species contribute according to their abilities. Support roles are vital to any successful operation. As the various species began preparing for deployment, the human team gathered in a quiet corner of the briefing chamber. Around them, aliens discussed tactics and strategies based on their specialized capabilities. The Veltharians planned elegant aerial maneuvers. The Zephyrians calculated optimal reaction patterns for multiple simultaneous threats. "They're assigning us to monitor duty," Engineer Hyojin said quietly. "They want us to stay back and watch sensors while they handle the actual fighting." "Based on our assessment results, it makes sense," Dr. So-Young admitted reluctantly. "We didn't demonstrate capabilities that would justify frontline combat roles." Commander Ji-Woo looked at the tactical display showing the ongoing attack. The pirate vessels continued their hit-and-run pattern, but something about their movements caught his attention. They weren't just random strikes. There was a pattern, but it wasn't the kind of pattern that followed standard military doctrine. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the attack sequence. "They're not attacking like a conventional force. They're improvising, adapting their tactics every few minutes. Each strike is different from the last." Pilot Tejo studied the display. "You're right. They're not following any textbook approach. They're making it up as they go along, responding to whatever the transport does to defend itself. The other species are planning to counter them with specialized tactics," Sergeant Minji observed. "Veltharian aerial precision against their maneuverability, Zephyrian reaction time against their unpredictability, standard approaches based on evolutionary advantages." Dr. So-Young pulled up her biological scanner readings from their teammates. Even now, preparing for a real combat situation, the human readings were showing those same unusual patterns she had noticed during the assessments. Neural activity was increasing, but not in the focused, specialized way she saw in other species. Instead, it was broad-spectrum activation across multiple systems. "What if that's exactly the wrong approach?" she said slowly. "What if these pirates are successful because they don't follow conventional tactics? What if they're winning because they adapt faster than their opponents can counter?" Captain Dongwu nodded thoughtfully. "Earth military history is full of irregular forces defeating superior conventional armies. Not through better equipment or training, but through unpredictability and adaptation. But we're assigned to support roles," Yejin pointed out. "They want us monitoring communications while the specialists handle combat." "Maybe that's exactly where we need to be," Jiwoo said. "In support positions, we can see the whole battlefield. We can watch how the pirates adapt to each species' specialized tactics, and when those tactics start failing, we'll be positioned to do something about it," Dongwu finished. "Something the specialized forces can't do because they're locked into their evolutionary advantages." The deployment preparations continued around them. Each alien species focused on maximizing their particular strengths. The Veltharians prepared equipment designed to enhance their aerial capabilities. The Zephyrians calibrated weapon systems for their lightning-fast reaction times. The Gorvanians selected armor and weapons suited to their defensive nature, but the humans prepared differently. Instead of optimizing for any single approach, they gathered equipment that would give them options. Multiple weapon types, various toolkits, communication gear that could interface with different systems. They prepared not for a specific type of combat, but for whatever combat might become. "Deployment in 30 minutes, Commander Nethvar announced. "All teams report to your assigned vessels." As they moved toward the docking bays, Dr. So-Young caught Captain Dongwu's arm. "I've been thinking about our assessment results," she said. "The controlled environment never activated our stress response systems. Our neural patterns suggest we have capabilities that only emerge under actual pressure." "What kind of capabilities?" "I'm not sure, but human evolution occurred under constant environmental pressure. Climate changes, natural disasters, resource scarcity, predator threats. We didn't evolve to excel in any single environment. We evolved to survive when environments change faster than anyone can adapt." They reached the docking bay where the human support vessel waited. It was smaller than the ships assigned to the combat species, equipped more for coordination and communication than direct assault. Exactly what would be expected for a support role. But as Captain Dongwu looked at his team, he realized they might be exactly where they needed to be. The other species would approach this crisis with their specialized advantages. When those advantages proved insufficient, when the situation required something beyond specialization, the humans would be ready. They would be ready to show the galaxy what adaptation looked like when perfect solutions weren't enough. The rescue operation was about to begin, and the humans were about to discover what they were really capable of when the stakes were real. and the situation was chaos. Around them, the galaxy's finest specialists prepared to do what they did best. But sometimes doing your best wasn't enough. Sometimes you needed to do something impossible instead. The rescue fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. Immediately, chaos filled their sensors. The civilian transport Harmony's Dawn hung wounded in space, atmosphere streaming from dozens of hull breaches. Around it, pirate vessels darted like angry insects, appearing and disappearing behind the gas giant's moons. Combat deployment now, Strike Leader Velthara announced over the communication channel. All units proceed according to tactical assignments. The Veltharian ships moved first, their graceful forms accelerating toward the pirate vessels with characteristic elegance. Their pilots navigated the complex gravitational fields around the gas giant, with the same flowing precision they had shown in the assessment chambers. Flight Leader Nixvaran led the Veltharian squadron in a beautiful formation, each ship moving in perfect harmony with the others. When the pirates appeared from behind a moon, the Veltharians were ready with precisely calculated intercept courses. But the pirates didn't behave like the controlled opponents in simulation exercises. Instead of engaging in predictable ship-to-ship combat, they scattered in all directions, using the moon's gravity wells to slingshot themselves into impossible trajectories. The elegant Veltharian formations found themselves chasing targets that refused to follow any recognizable pattern. "They're not fighting like any known pirate organization," Nixvaran reported, frustration clear in his musical voice. "Their movements have no tactical logic." Meanwhile, the Zephyrian boarding teams prepared to assault the transport itself. Swarm Captain Zliknith led his warriors in their signature rapid deployment, using their incredible reaction times to navigate the debris field around the damaged ship. The Zephyrians moved like living weapons, their 6 legs carrying them across the transport's hull with mechanical precision. When they breached the ship's damaged sections, their compound eyes tracked multiple threats simultaneously, ready to engage any pirates they encountered. But inside the transport, chaos ruled. The pirates had turned the ship's own systems against its defenders. Gravity fields shifted randomly between sections. Lighting flickered on and off in patterns that made targeting difficult. Emergency bulkheads opened and closed without warning, creating a constantly changing maze. Lieutenant Nam Subin and Corpsman Bei Jin Wu watched the assault unfold from the human support vessel. Their job was to monitor communications and coordinate between the different species' forces. But the communications were becoming increasingly frantic. "Zephyrian team leader to command," Zlikneth's voice crackled over the channel. "Pirates are not engaging in direct combat. They're using the ship's environmental systems to create unpredictable conditions. My warriors cannot establish targeting solutions." Captain Dongwu listened to the reports with growing understanding. The pirates weren't trying to win through superior firepower or better tactics. They were creating chaos and using it as a weapon. "Veltharian squadron leader to all units," came Nixvaran's voice. "Pirates are employing non-standard maneuvering. Our intercept calculations cannot compensate for their erratic behavior patterns." Dr. So Young monitored the biological readings from all combat teams. The specialized forces were showing signs of stress as their evolutionary advantages failed to provide solutions. The Veltharians' precise calculations became useless when their opponents refused to be predictable. The Zephyrians' lightning reflexes couldn't target enemies who hid behind constantly changing environmental conditions. "They're not fighting a war," she realized. "They're creating chaos and surviving in it. The specialized forces can't adapt fast enough." On the transport's lower decks, Corpsman Bei Jin Wu found himself in a situation that shouldn't have been possible. A section of the ship had lost artificial gravity, and pirates were using the 3-dimensional environment to attack from unexpected angles. Emergency lighting cast moving shadows that made it impossible to distinguish friend from foe. Bei should have been overwhelmed. According to his assessment scores, he lacked the reaction time to handle multiple simultaneous threats. His movement patterns were too simple to navigate complex 3-dimensional combat. His neural processing was too slow to track fast-moving opponents. But something happened that the assessments had never measured. Instead of trying to impose order on the chaos, Bei began to flow with it. When a pirate fired at him from above, he used the recoil from his own weapon to spin himself sideways, turning the attack into momentum for his own movement. When debris started floating through the compartment, he didn't treat it as an obstacle. He used it as cover. as weapons, as stepping stones through the zero-gravity environment. His movements weren't elegant like a Veltharian's or lightning-fast like a Zephyrian's. They were something else entirely. They were adaptive, unpredictable, impossible to counter because they weren't based on any single tactical doctrine. The monitoring sensors on Station Omega-7 began registering readings that made the technicians question their equipment. Lieutenant Subin faced her own impossible situation in the transport's main corridor. Pirates had collapsed part of the ceiling, creating a narrow crawl space that led to a critical life support junction. The Zephyrian assault team had tried to navigate it, but their rigid six-leg movement pattern couldn't adapt to the irregular space. According to her assessment results, Subin should have been even less capable of handling the situation. Her bone density was too high for flexible movement. Her muscle structure was designed for strength, not contortion. But she didn't try to move through the space the way the assessment suggested she should. Instead, her body seemed to flow like liquid, joints bending in ways that shouldn't have been possible, muscles working in coordination patterns that the sensors had never detected during controlled testing. She moved through the collapsed section not like a soldier following training, but like water finding its way through cracks in stone. When she reached the life support junction, she didn't follow standard procedures for system repair. She improvised, adapting to damage patterns that no manual had ever covered. Back on the support vessel, the monitoring equipment was recording data that forced everyone to reconsider everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. "These readings can't be correct," Engineer He-Jin said, staring at her displays. "Subin is showing neural activity levels that exceed Zephyrian standards. Bay's movement patterns are registering spatial reasoning beyond Veltharian norms." Dr. So-Young watched the data stream in real time. The humans weren't performing better than the other species in any single category. Instead, they were performing at high levels across multiple categories simultaneously, switching between different types of excellence as the situation required. "They're not optimized for any one thing," she realized. "They're optimized for optimization itself, for changing what they're good at based on what the situation needs." Captain Dongwu received a desperate communication from the Gorvanian assault leader. "Human support vessel, we require assistance. Our defensive formations are ineffective against opponents who refuse to engage directly." For the first time since the operation began, the human team was being asked to do more than monitor and coordinate. "What kind of assistance?" Dongwu asked, unknown. "Our tactical doctrine does not cover enemies who create chaos instead of order. We need something different." Commander Jiwoo looked at his team. According to their assessments, they were the least capable combat force in the rescue fleet. But the most capable forces were failing because the situation had moved beyond what their specializations could handle. "All human personnel," he announced. "We're going active. Forget your assessment scores. Forget what they said we're capable of. Show them what we're actually capable of when the rules don't apply." The human team deployed into the chaos around and inside the transport. They didn't move like any of the other species. They didn't follow established tactical doctrines or rely on evolutionary specializations. Instead, they adapted. When the situation required speed, they found speed. When it required precision, they found precision. When it required strength, they found strength. But most importantly, when it required something that had never been tried before, they created it. The monitoring sensors recorded performance metrics that shouldn't have been possible. Humans achieving burst speeds that rivaled Zephyrian records, while simultaneously displaying spatial reasoning that exceeded Veltharian calculations. But it wasn't happening in controlled, predictable ways. It was happening through pure adaptation to impossible circumstances. On Station Omega-7, alien observers watched the data streams with growing amazement. The specialized forces that had dominated the assessments were struggling with an enemy that refused to fight by the rules. But the humans, who had seemed so limited in controlled conditions, were thriving in the chaos. They weren't winning through superior capabilities in any single area. They were winning by becoming whatever the situation required them to become. The battle for the transport was far from over. But for the first time since the pirates had begun their attack, the rescue forces were adapting faster than their enemies. And leading that adaptation were the species that everyone had written off as slow, simple, and predictable. The humans were showing the galaxy what evolution looked like when it chose adaptability over specialization, and the readings were impossible to ignore. Back on Station Omega-7, The monitoring center had become a place of stunned silence. Rows of sophisticated sensors tracked the rescue operation in real time, displaying data that forced every observer to question their understanding of human capabilities. Dr. Lim Jae-sung stared at his display screens with the expression of someone watching physics laws being rewritten. As the human evolutionary biologist stationed on the station, he had access to the most detailed biological monitoring equipment in the galaxy. The readings streaming from the combat zone made no sense according to everything he thought he knew about his own species. "This is impossible," muttered analyst Oh Ye-jin, her fingers flying across control panels as she tried to verify the sensor data. The readings show human performance exceeding baseline measurements by factors that shouldn't be biologically possible. Chief Science Officer Vrexion, a massive Gorvanian whose natural armor made him look like a walking research station, leaned over the monitoring displays. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where careful measurement and precise calculation meant survival. He trusted sensors more than opinions, and the sensors were telling him something that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about evolution. "Run the calibration sequence again," he rumbled in his deep voice. "These readings suggest human neural activity is scaling upward under stress rather than degrading. That contradicts basic biological principles." Data specialist Quilmara, a Veltharian whose crystalline form reflected the light from dozens of monitoring screens, had been tracking the performance metrics since the combat began. Her species had created the most sophisticated biological monitoring systems in known space. If there was an error in the readings, she would have found it by now. "Calibration complete," she announced in her musical voice. "All sensors are functioning within normal parameters. The readings are accurate." Dr. Lim stared at the data streaming from Lieutenant Subin's biological monitors. Her neural activity showed massive spikes in areas of the brain associated with spatial reasoning, muscle coordination, and tactical planning. But instead of the focused activation patterns typical of specialized species, her brain was lighting up across multiple regions simultaneously. "Look at this," he said, highlighting specific readings for the others to see. "Her brain isn't optimizing for any single function. It's activating multiple high-performance systems at the same time. That should cause interference, not enhancement." Analyst O studied the patterns with growing fascination. "It's not just Subin. All the human combatants are showing similar neural patterns. But it's not constant. The activation changes based on what the situation requires." The monitors showed Corpsman Bei Jin-woo engaging 3 pirates simultaneously in a zero-gravity environment. According to his assessment scores, he lacked the reaction time and spatial awareness for such complex combat. But the real-time readings showed his brain reconfiguring itself in real time, activating different neural pathways as the tactical situation changed. "When he needs rapid reflexes, his neural processing accelerates," Dr. Lim observed. "When he needs spatial reasoning, different areas activate. When he needs precise motor control, his muscle coordination systems spike. It's like his brain is changing what it's optimized for moment by moment." Chief Science Officer Vrexion reviewed the combat footage alongside the biological data. The human movements didn't follow any recognizable pattern from galactic military doctrine. Instead of relying on single superior capabilities, they seemed to flow between different types of excellence as the situation demanded. This explains why their assessment scores were unremarkable, he realized. The controlled testing environment only measured peak performance in isolated categories. It never tested adaptive performance under changing conditions. Data specialist Quilmara pulled up comparative analysis between human performance in the assessments versus the current combat situation. The difference was staggering. In controlled conditions, humans had performed adequately but unremarkably. In chaotic combat, they were achieving performance levels that exceeded specialized species in multiple categories. "But this raises a more fundamental question," she said. "If humans are capable of this level of adaptive performance, why did their species evolve this way when specialization is typically more efficient?" Dr. Lim had been thinking about that same question. As an evolutionary biologist, he understood that evolution typically favored efficiency and specialization. Species evolved to excel in their particular environmental niche, but the data suggested humans had evolved for something entirely different. What if their environment was never stable enough for specialization to be an advantage? He said slowly. What if they evolved on a world where conditions changed too rapidly for any single adaptation to remain optimal? He pulled up Earth's geological and climatic data, information that had been considered irrelevant to the assessment process. What he found supported his hypothesis in ways that amazed him. "Look at this," he said, displaying Earth's environmental history. Massive climate shifts every few thousand years. Ice ages that appeared and disappeared on geological timescales that most species would consider instantaneous. Volcanic events that changed global conditions within decades. Asteroid impacts that reshaped entire continents. Analyst O studied the data with growing understanding. Most worlds have environmental changes that occur over millions of years, giving evolution time to adapt through specialization. But Earth's environment changed on timescales measured in thousands or tens of thousands of years. Too fast for specialization, Dr. Lim continued. Any species that optimized for specific conditions would go extinct when those conditions changed. Only generalists could survive, but not just any generalists. They needed to be able to rapidly optimize for new conditions without losing the ability to re-optimize when conditions changed. Again, Chief Science Officer Vrexion processed this information with the methodical approach typical of his species. "You're suggesting humans evolved not for any specific environment, but for environmental instability itself." "More than that," Dr. Lim said, excitement growing in his voice. "They evolved for rapid optimization under stress. The more chaotic and unpredictable the situation becomes, the better their adaptive systems function." On the combat monitors, they watched human forces achieving impossible coordination with alien teams that had initially dismissed them as support personnel. Engineer Yu He-jin was interfacing with Zephyrian technical systems, somehow matching their rapid data processing speeds. Commander Jiwoo was coordinating with Veltharian pilots, providing tactical guidance that enhanced their natural aerial capabilities. "They're not just adapting to the situation," Quilmara observed. "They're adapting to work with other species' capabilities, enhancing combined effectiveness beyond what any single species could achieve." The implications were staggering. Every species in the galaxy had evolved toward specialization within their particular niche. But humans had evolved toward something entirely different. They had evolved to optimize for optimization itself, to become whatever a situation required rather than excelling at any single thing. "This changes everything," Vrexion said quietly. "We've been categorizing species based on their specialized capabilities. But humans represent something we've never encountered before. A species optimized for situations that exceed any single specialization." Dr. Lim watched the real-time performance data with a mixture of pride and amazement. The humans in combat were demonstrating capabilities that their own species had never fully understood. Under extreme stress, their neural architecture was unlocking potential that normal conditions never revealed. "The assessment protocols will need to be completely redesigned," he realized. "We've been measuring species based on their performance under ideal conditions, but humans are designed for conditions that are anything except ideal." Analyst O pulled up projections based on the current performance data. If humans could maintain this level of adaptive capability, their potential applications within galactic civilization were far broader than anyone had imagined. "They could serve as universal adapters," she said. "Any situation too complex or unpredictable for specialized species to handle. Any mission requiring coordination between multiple species with different capabilities. Any problem that doesn't have a standard solution." On the monitors, the rescue operation continued. The specialized alien forces had stabilized their positions by working with human adaptability, rather than relying solely on their own evolutionary advantages. The pirates, who had been winning through chaos and unpredictability, were finding themselves outmatched by opponents who thrived in chaos. The humans weren't winning by being better at any single thing. They were winning by being impossible to predict, impossible to counter with any single strategy, and impossible to defeat by following rules that applied to every other species in the galaxy. "We need to inform the Galactic Council immediately," Chief Science Officer Vrexion said. "The preliminary species classification for humanity is completely inaccurate." Dr. Lim nodded, but his attention was focused on the biological readings that kept streaming in from the combat zone. Humans under stress were showing performance capabilities that redefined what evolution could produce. They represented something the galaxy had never seen before. A species optimized not for any particular challenge but for the impossible itself. And judging by the combat data, They were very, very good at it. The rescue operation ended 12 hours after it began. The civilian transport Harmony's Dawn was secure, its 15,000 passengers safe. The pirate forces had been either captured or driven off, but the real victory was in the data that could no longer be ignored or explained. Away Admiral Song Kyung-min stood before the assembled Galactic Council in the Great Chamber of Station Omega-7 representatives from dozens of species filled the curved seating areas. Their attention focused on the holographic displays showing post-action analysis data. What they saw challenged every assumption about human capabilities and evolutionary biology. The preliminary species assessment for humanity was based on incomplete information, Admiral Song began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. The controlled testing environment failed to reveal our species' actual capabilities. High Commander Thexorial, whose insectoid form dominated the central platform, studied the data with compound eyes that processed multiple information streams simultaneously. His species had been conducting galactic assessments for thousands of years. He had never seen readings like these. Explain the discrepancy, he requested in the clicking language that the chamber's translators converted to speech. Your species demonstrated adequate but unremarkable performance during controlled assessments. The combat data suggests capabilities that exceed those measurements by impossible margins. Ambassador Shin Mi-kyung activated the holographic displays, showing side-by-side comparisons between assessment performance and combat performance. The difference was so dramatic it looked like data from two entirely different species. The controlled environment measured our baseline capabilities, she explained. But human evolution occurred under conditions that were never controlled or predictable. Our true capabilities only emerge when faced with chaos and complexity that exceed standard parameters. Council Primeth Axion, whose crystalline Veltharian form caught and reflected the chamber's lighting, had been reviewing the detailed biological monitoring data for hours. His species prided themselves on precise measurement and calculation. The human readings challenged his understanding of biological possibility. The neural activation patterns you demonstrated are unprecedented, he said in his musical voice. Your brain architecture appears to reconfigure itself in real time, based on situational requirements. This should not be biologically possible. Dr. Park So-young stepped forward to address the scientific concerns. She had spent the past day analyzing the combat data alongside alien scientists, trying to understand what had happened to her own species during the rescue operation. Human evolution occurred on a world where environmental conditions changed rapidly and unpredictably, she explained. Ice ages, volcanic events, climate shifts, and other catastrophic changes happened on timescales too fast for traditional evolutionary specialization. Species that optimized for specific conditions went extinct when those conditions changed. She activated a new display, showing Earth's environmental history compared to other inhabited worlds in the galaxy. The difference was striking. Where other worlds showed gradual, predictable changes over millions of years, Earth showed constant, dramatic upheavals over much shorter periods. Our ancestors survived by developing neural architecture that could rapidly optimize for new conditions, So-young continued. But not just once. They needed to be able to re-optimize repeatedly as conditions continued to change. Over millions of years, this created a species designed for adaptation itself, rather than adaptation to any specific environment. High Commander Thexorial processed this information with the methodical approach typical of his species. You are suggesting that humans evolved not for any particular capability, but for the ability to develop capabilities as needed. More than that, Admiral Song said, we evolved for situations that exceed the capabilities of any single specialization. When problems become too complex or unpredictable for specialized solutions, human adaptability becomes the primary advantage. The chamber filled with quiet discussion, as representatives considered the implications. Every species in the galaxy had evolved toward specialization and efficiency. The concept of a species optimized for inefficiency and adaptation was foreign to their experience. Ambassador Shin took advantage of the pause to present the most significant finding from the combat analysis. The monitoring data shows that human performance improves exponentially as situations become more chaotic and unpredictable. We don't just adapt to chaos, we thrive in it. Council Prime Nethaxian reviewed footage of human combatants working alongside other species during the rescue operation. The humans hadn't tried to outperform the specialists in their areas of expertise. Instead, they had enhanced the effectiveness of specialized capabilities by providing adaptive coordination and tactical flexibility. Your forces demonstrated something we have never observed, he admitted. The ability to enhance other species' specialized capabilities through real-time adaptation. This suggests applications beyond individual performance metrics. High Commander Thexorial had been conducting his own analysis of the tactical data. The pirate forces had been using chaos and unpredictability as weapons, creating situations too complex for traditional specialized responses. Until the humans had joined the engagement. The hostile forces were neutralized not through superior firepower or better individual capabilities, he observed. They were defeated by opponents who adapted faster than they could change tactics. Admiral Song nodded. Human military doctrine has always emphasized adaptability over specialization. We learned long ago that the enemy gets a vote in how battles develop. No plan survives contact with an opponent who refuses to cooperate with your specialized advantages. The Chamber's displays showed performance metrics that forced a complete re-evaluation of human potential. In controlled conditions, humans performed within acceptable but unremarkable ranges. Under stress and complexity, they achieved capabilities that rivaled or exceeded the galaxy's most specialized species across multiple categories. Simultaneously, this requires a fundamental revision of our species classification system, Council Prime Nethaxian said. We have been categorizing species based on specialized peak performance. But humans represent something our system was never designed to measure. Ambassador Shin presented the final element of their analysis. We propose a new classification category for humanity, not based on what we excel at, but on what we can become when excellence isn't enough. The holographic display showed a new designation that had been created specifically for humanity: Adaptive Optimization Specialists. The description read, species optimized for impossible situations requiring capabilities that exceed any single specialization. High Commander Thexorial studied the proposal with careful attention. You are requesting assignment to missions that other species have declared unsolvable. We're requesting assignment to missions that require solutions that don't exist yet, Admiral Song clarified. Situations too complex for specialized approaches. Problems that require creating new capabilities rather than applying existing ones. The voting process took 3 hours. Representatives needed time to review the data, consult with their homeworlds, and consider the implications of recognizing a species optimized for optimization itself.